That's R-A-N-D-L-E-S. When we received the grand jury investigation from Pennsylvania, it was shocking and it was saddening. And then I sat down to try to figure out, well, how many priests in the Kansas City area, the St. Louis area, and KCK had been similarly abusive? And the numbers were astounding. We have over 230 priests that we know of that have been sexually abusive in this area. And our population centers are much smaller. So it details that there is an even greater issue in the Kansas City, St. Louis, Missouri areas, and the Archdiocese of Kansas than what we're seeing out of the grand jury report in Philadelphia, out of Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania diocese, there were 6 dioceses involved in that report, and it included abuses that went back for many, many decades. It also included abuses that ranged from what would be considered less severe to the absolute worst things you can consider. We have those exact same abuses in Kansas City, in St. Louis, in Springfield, in Cape Girardeau, in Jefferson City, and in the Archdiocese of Kansas City, Kansas. My clients have called and asked if we could please ask that there be an investigation, a grand jury investigation or an attorney general's investigation on both sides of the state, considering the number of priests that we know of that have been abusive in the past. We don't know what's happening now, and we don't know the exact numbers because only the dioceses know those numbers. Today we have Scott Goodloe, Michael Sandridge, Tom Viviano, and Michael Foreman, all of whom are survivors of abuse by priests, who come to ask that there be an investigation and to explain why they believe it's so important that such an investigation take place. And we have Larry Probst as well.
Oh, hi, I'm Michael Sandridge, S-A-N-D-R-I-D-G-E. And when I read the reports coming out of Pennsylvania, it was like a flashback for all of us. Just the lack of transparency for these 2 dioceses, actually, Kansas and Missouri, is appalling. The way they proceeded in handling my case and several other cases where they actually just lied. Basically, it's time to stop the lying and the cover-up, and let's get down to what happened, what is still happening. I know there's several cases pending that are just as disgusting as what you're reading about now. This is a problem that doesn't go away, and it needs to be stopped as much as possible. When I was a victim in St. Elizabeth's Parish, where there were 4 pedophile priests in the same rectory. So multiply that with the other rectories, and after it was broken up, the pedophile priest was sent 10 blocks away to another parish. So, you know, it just needs to stop. And everyone here has been involved, victimized, survived, whatever you want to call it. But it's a process that does not go away and will affect these people the rest of their lives. And unless it happens to you, you really don't have any idea. You can empathize, almost sympathize, but there's really no way to be able for you guys to completely understand it, which is a good thing, perhaps, because you were not abused. And if there's any other people that were abused by any of the priests that Rebecca listed, please just come forward. And I would like the Attorney General, the grand jury, just to do the same thing in Pennsylvania. You know, the Pope has said that he wants everybody prosecuted to the full extent of the law. So let's just all get together and make it happen. Thank you.
My name is Scott Goodloe, G-O-O-D-L-O-E. To begin, my sole purpose is not to really do anything other than offer support for someone, for anyone who has felt very likely alone, isolated, and that there's nobody that cares about what's happened to them. From 1981 to 1984, I was the victim of sexual abuse by a priest, Father Martin Juarez. I settled my claims with the Archbishop Keller and with the diocese in 1999. However, my abuser has never been named publicly and has never been held accountable. This is a difficult period for me personally, and also was difficult because I was trying to negotiate being a teenager. I'm lucky in that as I recovered, I had great support from friends, family, and others who were able to offer the true love and comfort that was required to overcome these events. As we see today with the events in Pennsylvania, there's a need for accountability and true reconciliation in the church. Where there are people who wish to suppress these voices, I urge all people of faith to consider that these victims are members of your family. What justice would you seek for them? We are certainly more aware now, and that is good progress. But there are other victims who have yet to come forward and offer their stories. I urge all of these people to step forward and give that account. I don't seek to shake the faith of people, and I don't see the seek to destroy the Catholic Church, as there are still many good people involved in it. What I want is justice, an honest and heartfelt apology from the leadership, and less defensive posturing from these same leaders. In the local diocese, I ask that they have open and honest dialogue with victims, both now and in the future, and that they work with the civil authorities when these issues arrive. The lack of transparency in these issues needs to be corrected for true healing to begin. And I would like to see the attorney generals in states like Kansas and Missouri open investigations into these abuse allegations and ensure that perpetrators and collaborators are held accountable for their actions.
Hi, my name is Tom Viviano, V-I-V-I-A-N-O. I too am a victim. I'm from the St. Louis area. I was in 3rd grade when it started. It stopped in 8th grade when I moved away. The thing that I want to say to all of those that perhaps will listen and maybe want to learn or know, and that is, it does hurt. I'm now 62 years old, and I still live with the pain of what happened to me when I was in grade school. And what I'd like to see is a true, open, honest investigation. The church has not come forward. They want to offer up perhaps a prayer or a mass of forgiveness. Doesn't help. Doesn't go far enough. And what I like to see again is a true accountability. I read an article today of what the Pope said. He said we need to stop this culture of death. And it is a death. A part of you does die. Emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. You die on the inside. And that's something every day I have to live with. I live with the pain. I live with the isolation. My family chose not to be supportive. My mother said to me when I shared with her and the family, my mother said, well, it's not my fault, I didn't know. Mom, I'm not blaming you, I'm not blaming anybody. My older brother called me to his house the day Rebecca and I were going to file the case. And the night before, he says to me, don't do this. You're going to hurt the family's name. And I said, what about me? He said, well, it happened a long time ago. How often do all of us hear that? That it happened a long time ago. But it's today. It's today that we feel it. And so I want to beg, please, the Attorney General and anybody else, let's get the ball on the road. Let's do something about this. And I don't know, Rebecca, if I can say this, but you stop me. And that is, we have this time period that you only have so much time that you can file. And all I want to say is, why does the advantage go to those who created the problem in the first place? I know many who've been abused but are terrified to come forward because of the abuse that continues by the church with their delays, their constant belittling, their refusal to acknowledge the pain that people like myself have gone through. And so, again, let us be honest and open. This is not an easy thing to live through. Thank you.
My name is Mike Foreman, and I just finished writing my story last week, a couple days before this Pennsylvania story broke. And I'm going to put my story on my website by the end of this week for everyone to read. And I would just like to read the first paragraph of my story. Joseph Nauman is the Archbishop of the Catholic Archdiocese of Kansas City in Kansas. Catholic Archbishop Joseph F. Nauman covered up my childhood sexual assault in writing in a letter he wrote me. In this letter, Catholic Archbishop Joseph F. Nauman also clearly and blatantly lied about his own sincere prayer. Not just his regular prayer, his sincere prayer. I will go over this letter in my story. I call it Archbishop Joseph F. Nauman's Letter of Lies. Archbishop Joseph Nauman and the Catholic Church also lied to the entire Kansas City area about healing, mercy, and empathy. I am ironclad proof of that. And I would like to briefly speak directly to Archbishop Joseph Nauman. Joseph, your cheap, horribly painful, and blatantly unfair statute of limitations defense has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on what a Catholic priest actually did to me when I was 11 years old, or how it has horribly affected and infected my whole life. Joseph, I am going to stand outside every single Catholic church in your diocese. Okay. So please look for my story at the end of this week. My web address is going to be iamnotcatholic.com. The last thing I would like to say to everyone, it is an absolute poverty that the statute of limitations is the crown jewel of the Catholic Church. What does God and Jesus Christ think about that, Joseph? Thank you for listening.
The letter that Archbishop Nauman wrote to Michael is found in the packet of material. And the significance of that letter is that he was abused by Father Finian Meese, who was known by the Archdiocese to have abused a number of children and made settlements with them. Yet, in the letter that was sent in 2014 to Michael Foreman, it says that they find his allegations not believable, knowing that in 1972 he had already had allegations against him that caused him to be moved in 1973 to Church of the Good Shepherd. In the 1990s, they settled claims against him for at least 2 people, potentially 3. And then after Michael brought his claims, they were told that they were not credible. So that is the genesis of his anger. And then the statute of limitations in Kansas is such that for individuals who repress memory of abuse before the 1992 statute. There is no recompense.
Yeah, so Joseph used the worst part of my suffering against me to cause me a great deal of additional agony and suffering through horribly painful, blatant injustice. And
if any of you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Rebecca, if you're going to address, take some questions from us, could we kindly ask you to move a little closer to the microphone, please? What I'm wondering is that because Bishop Fenn was the first sitting bishop to have a criminal conviction in this whole sex abuse scandal, do you think that that will give your request for grand jury or attorney general investigations a little more horsepower?
Well, I don't know if the fact that he was criminally convicted will do that, but I would certainly hope the fact that there was a Father Radigan still in the midst of children as late as 2011, if that will give impetus to this. Because we don't know what rests in the files of the Catholic Church. We can't get there. The only places that have ever gotten there were St. Louis, where I've given you the matrix of abusers that they've acknowledged, and Boston, during the time of cardinal law. So we don't know what the Church knows. What we've given to you is what we know as outsiders trying to get the truth from a secretive organization.
Rebecca, there are several Catholic high schools and grade schools in the area, and a lot of priests have interaction with school children who may not be in the home parishes that they might be connected to. Is there any reason to believe that the priests on this list from Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri had interactions with students at those high schools or grade schools?
Some of those priests we know had interactions with students in the high schools and in the preschools and the schools. Particularly there on Kansas City, Kansas side, a Father Kalal is listed on that group. And on the Kansas City, Missouri side, we've got Father Radigan. But each of the priests that were from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, O'Brien, Reardon, Wigginnick, Tierney, there were a whole plethora of priests that McGlynn had contact with children throughout the time that they were tenured with the Diocese of Kansas City, Missouri.
Rebecca, this list doesn't, it includes the Archdiocese of KCK, but we don't know about the rest of Kansas, like Wichita, Salina, some of the other ones. Do you have any estimates or anything on what those might be?
All I know are the ones that I've settled, and then I know that there's a book about the Archdiocese of Wichita where at least 4 other priests are listed in that book. So based upon my understanding, there are a number out there, but I've only had, because of locality, I've only had a few cases myself.
I mean, it may be easy for people here in the Midwest to separate themselves from this news because a lot of it's happening on the East Coast away from here. Why is it important for people to hear this and take a look at this?
Well, because the numbers that we have compared to the population center that we have make this probably an even greater scandal than it is on the East Coast. I mean, we're talking now, we know of 238 priests in the 5 dioceses that I've named. And then there are other dioceses as well in Kansas besides those 5. And when you're talking 238 priests in this locality with this population, that's huge, particularly since you're talking about 300 priests out of the Pennsylvania grand jury. So we're not very far behind, and we have a smaller population. So we have the risk of more children having been abused, percentage-wise.
What do you think the chances are now of grand juries being formed? I remember in 2011, I think it was February, you stood on the courthouse steps and SNAP was there having a press conference about this very thing. And then a few months later, the Radigan scandal broke. And I believe the prosecutor's office at that time said something about they would look into it.
Right.
Whatever happened with that?
Well, I think that there were so many millions of dollars spent on the Bishop Fenn conviction, and he was the first convicted, that there hasn't been a push for greater accountability beyond Bishop Fenn and the Radigan affair. And that's unfortunate because we know of hundreds of victims that we have interviewed in our office. And so if our office alone knows of hundreds of victims, and we know that sex abuse is one of the least reported crimes, the potentiality is that there are thousands upon thousands of victims in Missouri. And there's no true accountability until there's true transparency. This isn't about destroying the Catholic Church. This is about rooting out an evil. It's as evil in the Catholic Church as it is in USA Gymnastics, or as it is with any of the colleges that have recently undergone their own issues with regard to sexual abuse. The Catholic Church should not be held to a different standard than every other organization that has sexual abuse issues in its midst.
Of these priests that you've identified, are any of them, do any of them have any ongoing role with the church? Are they all retired? I'm guessing some maybe are deceased.
Some are deceased. Most are retired. A few have been laicized. With the exception of Father Kalal, I'm not aware of any of them having ongoing church affiliations. We do know that at least Father Wise a few years ago was allowed to lead a church class at the Co-Cathedral in St. Joseph, and Father O'Connell was allowed to travel and give lectures at various Catholic universities. And even though that isn't considered public ministry per se, it's still allowing him to use his role as a Catholic priest in areas where he comes into contact with youth. And so we do have the concern. And the fact that we don't know it is because we shouldn't know it because we're on the outside. And so those that are on the inside are the ones that know where these priests are and what they're doing.
So what is the next step now? Do you formally send documentation to AGs in Kansas and Missouri and go from there?
We do intend for each of the clients that wish to send letters of complaint to the attorneys general in both states, and then we'll follow up from there and see what we can do.
How many clients do you have?
Too many.
Yeah, I would estimate that I've handled a little over 300 of these cases. And in terms of active cases, there are approximately a dozen active cases right now.
For people who want to get in touch with you, who think that this may have been part of their past or know this has been part of their past, what do you want them to know about getting in touch?
Well, they're welcome to contact me. They can contact me at my law office, which is Randles Mata, or they can also contact the prosecutors themselves. If you have an issue and you've been an abuse survivor, it's very important to reach out to civil authorities with regard to the abuse that's occurred to you, because there has not been true transparency in the church. Telling the church as well is not a bad thing as long as the civil authorities are on notice that there is an issue.
Several years ago, the diocese here in Kansas City appointed an ombudsman's office to look into these things independently. And then, of course, they had the report from Todd Graves. My question is, do you think that they have made an effort, a concerted effort to correct some of these?
Well, the ombudsman's role, as I understand it, is to take in allegations of abuse and then to handle internal investigations for the church, then refer them for prosecution if necessary. With the statutes of limitation as they are, I'm not sure that there's been any referrals for criminal prosecution because Missouri statutes of limitation are fairly short, which is, I think, a travesty of justice, especially for someone like Michael Foreman.
Amen.
But Their role really hasn't been to uncover the abuses, the historical abuses, and see what's still going on. They take in the newest reports of abuse and then handle them from that point. And the Graves report was an interesting report. It was very well done. It was very well documented. But when push came to shove, it was also very well protected by the attorney-client privilege because it was an internal investigation. It wasn't an external investigation. So any of the information that the Graves report relied upon is not accessible for the rest of the public to discern whether or not the information contained in it is complete and fully accurate. Now, I have no reason to doubt the accuracy of it because it was fairly harsh where Bishop Finn is concerned. But the mere fact that it is an internal report and not an external report renders its conclusions at least somewhat suspect.
If I might add one more thing, it's Miss Rebecca. It's hard and it's a shame that this is what she does. That's how many cases to have an attorney that specializes in something like this. I commend her courage, her steadfastness. I know what I'm going through. I can't imagine she lives it every day with somebody new and somebody new and somebody new. And so I'm going to request we all pray for her, her staff, people who really put a lot of time into it. I go to therapy once a week, been going since 2012, and my therapist does several things, but one that he specializes in is abuse by the Catholic Church. And that, to me, is another shame, that we have to have a specialty. It's just unbelievable.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.